Okay, we are now recording. Thank you, Randy. You remember in our previous session, we talked about the difference between what I characterized as technical and adaptive leadership. Without going into last week's lecture completely, let me just say that a technical leader is a leader who people turn to with a technical problem. Okay, people come to the leader and they say, we have no food, we have no water, the enemy is pursuing us. What are we supposed to do now? Such a leader, his task or her task is to provide a simple solution to the problem that is presented. All right. If a question is addressed to the leader and it's a technical problem, the leader either solves the problem by himself or herself, or if he is unable to do so, what does he do? He turns to God, and God provides the necessary remedy for whatever the problem is. All right, that's technical challenge, that's technical leadership, very, very simple. An adaptive leader, you remember from last week, however, must deal with a different kind of problem, because it is not just the problem itself that the adaptive leader must face, but the people who ask the questions, the people who complain, the people themselves become part of the problem. That's the question which the adaptive leader must address. He must urge the people to change their behavior when that is necessary. He must urge them to accept responsibility and take on the burden of making decisions if that is the problem. He must urge them or push them to provide a solution to their own problem without necessarily expecting the leader, Moses, or God to provide a solution for them. Now, obviously, adaptive leadership can be an extremely taxing and draining experience for any leader, even a great leader like Moses. So, if you want to know what is the difference between Moses in the book of Exodus and Moses in the book of Numbers, the answer is simply this. The nature of the problems that Moses' leader is facing are different from the problems he faced in the book of Exodus. In the book of Exodus, he was dealing with technical problems. Moses, we have no water. What will we drink? Moses, we have no food. What can we eat? Moses, the Egyptians are coming after us to destroy us. How will we cross this river? And in each case, the people expect Moses or God to supply the answer to the problem that they present. That's simple enough. But in the book of Numbers, it's the people themselves who constitute the problem. They are the ones who, in grumbling or complaining, confound Moses, make him irritable, make him inadequate, because he does not seem to be able to deal with the people. It's not the problems per se, but the people who ask about these problems and their failure to accept responsibility, their failure to confront these issues on their own. This is what frustrates Moses, so much so, you'll remember that last week, Moses turns to God. And after the people start complaining about lack of interesting food, an unvaried diet, no meat, whatever, the people complain, we ate cucumbers and fish in the land of Egypt, and here we only have this very plain manna. Apparently even the quail from earlier had ceased. Moses turns to God and he says, God, what shall I do with this people? How can I handle them? Did I give birth to this people? Did I conceive this people? That I should be charged with nursing them, taking care of them, watching over them, and solving and answering all of their complaints? If so, God, if that's my task, if after a year of teaching them your law, if after a year of their becoming more independent and learning to trust in you, if they revert to the complaints and the nagging and the problems, if that is my fate, God, why don't you just get rid of me right now? I would rather not go through this process of having to deal for the rest of my life with this people, having to deal with the same kinds of problems. And every time that people have an issue, they will always come back to me and they will always expect me to have the answer. And Moses says in the course of this little speech, he says the following. I'm going to read it to you. When Moses is confronted by this latest challenge, he becomes frustrated. He doesn't know what to do. And he says to God the following, and I quote, "Why have you brought this trouble upon your servant?" God, why did you bring this trouble upon me? What have I done to displease you that you burden me with all these people? In other words, did I do something wrong? Did I do something to displease you to cause me to have to deal with the trouble of all of this people? Did I conceive all this people? In other words, did I give birth to them? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to bring them to the land you promised on oath to their ancestors? God, why did you burden me to take care of and to carry and to watch over and to protect and to solve all of the problems of this people? I'm not their conceiver. I'm not their parent. I'm not their nurse. Why did you put all this upon me to give it to me to bring them to Egypt? And if this is my fate, God, if this is what you have in store for me, if I'm going to deal with this continually now, tell you what, better you just ease me of my problems. Just get rid of me right now. I don't have to deal with the whole future of this. All right. So Moses, in a way, is now complaining. Okay. Unlike previous examples of dealing with a recalcitrant people, Moses says to God, listen, what can I do? How can I provide food for all this people? Why did you place me in this position? How can I possibly deal with this? And why should I? After all, God, it's your people. You sent me to bring them out. Do I have to care for every little problem that comes up? And now God will respond to him, and we'll see that next week. Does anybody, and you can unmute yourself in response to this if you want to answer the question, does anybody feel that Moses is responsible in any way for the problem he is describing? Is Moses in any way responsible for creating the situation he finds himself in? Cantor, go ahead.
I have a problem with the whole system that we're operating under.
Okay.
And do we ever see a situation, or have we seen it yet? And do we see it even later, where God gives Moses any tools to deal with these problems? Is there any teaching going on? Because what I feel like is, somebody is, that God has given Moses, put Moses in this position, obviously, that he didn't want to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Gave him no guidance other than to say, do this and I'll take care of it. And every time Moses goes to God, God fixes it. But he gives Moses no tools to deal with the next problem or to create it. So what God has now done is he's created a system that is set up for failure, because this will continue and now comes to a head. And now God gets angry and acts like a petulant child and says, you want more food? I'll give you fish. I'll give you fish till they come out of your ears. I'll give you more fish than you need. And I read this and I go, is this the message that God really it really wants us to learn? By giving us, again, no, if God wanted us to fish, then he should have pointed us in the direction of water instead of the middle of the desert where there's no fish. If God had wanted us to, I mean, he's perfectly fine saying, go build me a tabernacle. Now, where they found all these forests in the middle of the desert is interesting, and where they found all this stuff to, and he never told them to eat the flocks. Moses now says, well, why shouldn't we just eat the flocks? We've got all this food. Why are you now worried about fish? So I'm really a little confused.
All right, Cantor, you raise an excellent question. Cantor has raised the stakes on our issue here. Cantor has pushed the problem up a level. I suggested to you, or I asked you, if you thought that Moses was the problem, but Cantor short circuits that question and says, the real problem isn't Moses. The real problem, Cantor Cohen is saying, is God. God tells Moses, take this people, go to Pharaoh, tell them to let them go to serve me. He doesn't give Moses too many instructions. Moses goes in, he delivers the message, he brings the people out. And it seems as if God doesn't give Moses any instruction as to how he is to deal with the people or with any of the problems that they will confront on their journey through the wilderness. So it seems like Cantor is saying that every time a problem arises, which it does, and every time the people turn to Moses with the problem saying, what are you going to do? Because Cantor is saying, because God did not provide Moses with instruction on these issues or the answers to the problems, Moses is forced to say, I don't know, or to delay the issue and turn to God, and hopefully God will solve it. Did God send Moses? Let's take Cantor's question. Is God really the one who's responsible for what's going on here? The people's constant complaining, their constant grumbling. Can we say that maybe God is the figure, I won't say the person or the individual, but is God the agent that is responsible? Would anyone like to either second what Cantor Cohen says or perhaps disagree? Go ahead, Jerry.
I think Moses, with his responsibility, is now remembering and repeating some of the things he did as a younger man. When he saw the Egyptians striking down a fellow Israelite, he did away with them. Then Moses had 40 years where he was tending flocks. So now people are not sheep, yet Moses was hoping in his good heart that these Israelites would mature and learn. Now Moses has become frustrated because they have not learned or matured.
Very, very good, Jerry. Cantor, what Jerry is saying is simply this. Moses has had a life of making decisive decisions without confronting God. When the Egyptian taskmaster was beating the Hebrew slave, Moses didn't turn to God and say, what should I do? Moses acted. There were a lot of times in Moses's life, especially before he assumed his mission, when Moses responds out of a sense of injustice, a sense of indignity of what's happening. Moses takes the initiative. Moses doesn't stop and say, what do I do, God? Even though God gives him instructions, God tells Moses to take the people out. He doesn't tell Moses how to do it. He relies on Moses's native, as Jerry might say, native ability, his talent, his ability to solve problems as a leader. There is nothing that indicates that God gave Moses a certain leadership style. You're right, Cantor. God never says, Moses, this is how you're going to handle it. This is how you're going to deal with the people. This is how you're going to deal with their problems. Whenever they have an issue, you don't understand, bring it to me and I'll solve it. God doesn't really do that. He just says to Moses, you're my agent. Take the people out now and deal with it. Go ahead, Cantor, respond.
I'm sorry.
All right.
I understand that if I'm going to war, then and I'm the leader of the people, I don't go and I find a shepherd who takes care of sheep to be my military leader because he doesn't have any military training. Moses never had to go find water. The sheep found the water. Moses didn't have to find anything for the sheep to eat. They ate whatever grew on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to indicate that Moses had any education in anything worldly. I'm not going to go hire a shepherd just because he's a shepherd. And you're going to tell me, well, the flock of sheep is just like the flock of the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. No, I'm sorry. That's not who I go and choose. This is God coming up with it could have been anybody. Why Moses?
Okay, good
We
question.
never have any indication of why Moses was chosen.
All right, let's deal with Cantor's problem. A shepherd, his job is to watch over sheep, to be there to watch over the sheep. And the only rules he knows is to watch over the sheep, to make sure none of them stray away, to lead them in directions in which they can find pasture and water. And usually the desert provides that. He usually knows where the oases are. He knows where the vegetation is. So a shepherd, largely, he has a very simple task. He's there to drive out the predators. When predators come up, he's there to chase them away. He leads the sheep. He keeps them together. He keeps them on the move, takes them to water, takes them to pasture. That's a shepherd's job. Now, one could argue that a shepherd's job is very easy, especially because sheep never talk. Has anybody ever heard of complaining sheep? I've never heard of complaining sheep. You know, the sheep, they miss a day of water, they're not going to complain. They're not going to come back to you and say, hey, what's the deal here? You're supposed to provide some water. The problem with the Jewish people, to distinguish between a group of sheep and the Jewish people, as Cantor has asked, is that the Jewish people are independent human beings. They are human beings possessed of a will of their own. It is going to be, Cantor, infinitely harder to deal with human beings than it is with sheep, because unlike sheep, who have no will of their own and are totally dependent upon the shepherd and will not question what the shepherd does, the people of Israel are going to question a lot. Okay. Now, when you say that Moses had no particular training, I would suggest that a shepherd probably has a lot of training. Moses, when he took care of his flocks, he knew the area around the place where Jethro was a tribal leader. He knew the area. He probably knew where the pasture was. He probably knew where the water, the oases were. He probably had to keep an eye out for predators. He probably had to keep an eye out for wandering sheep to make sure they didn't get lost. So I would say that Moses had certain qualities that made him an ideal shepherd. His job was to watch over the flock that was entrusted to his care. You could say that God was doing nothing this different. He was saying to Moses, all right, now the sheep that I want you to take care of are not the sheep of your father-in-law Jethro. I want you to take care of my sheep. I want you to take care of my people Israel. So Moses says, don't send me, I'm not adequate, blah, blah, blah. And finally, God says, don't worry, I'm going to equip you with everything that you need. Don't worry about your adequacy or inadequacy. You're doing my task, you'll be successful. He guarantees Moses success. So Moses, in obedience to God, goes to Pharaoh. He speaks the words that God directs him. And even there, Cantor, Moses doesn't invent what he says to Pharaoh. God says to Moses, tell Pharaoh he does this, or if not, this is going to happen. So again, Moses's job is relatively simple so far. Go to Pharaoh, tell Pharaoh if you do this. He does. Pharaoh ignores it, or he initially ignores it and then calls Moses back. Moses still have a relatively easy job. Finally, at the end of the 10th plague, God tells Moses, this is it. After this plague, Pharaoh is going to not only let you go, he's going to push you out. He's going to tell you to leave. Get ready. And he even gives message to Moses. He says, Moses, tell the Jewish people to prepare lambs for the night of the 10th plague. He tells them everything to do. So far, God is giving Moses all of the instructions, everything he has to do. Now comes the interesting part, Cantor. Now the Jewish people leave and they go out. And Moses has told them what to do. They pretty much do it. They come to the sea. They face a dead end. The seas are in front of them. And then they turn back and they look and they see Pharaoh pursuing them. Now the sheep talk. And the sheep says, Moses, what did you do? Did you bring us out here to die by the water? We can't go far. We can't go any further. Pharaoh is closing in from behind. What do you expect us to do? For the first time, Moses is in an unusual position. He has not been told by God about this problem. They have suddenly confronted it. All Moses knows is God says, trust in me, I'm going to get your people through. And he knows that the people he's leading are saying, what are you doing? You brought us all into danger. Now, Moses at this point, Cantor says to God, God, what do we do? And God answers Moses, why are you asking me what to do? Tell the people to go forward. Your job is to lead them forward. Tell them to move into the sea. And sure enough, the people move into the sea. Moses lifts his staff. They cross through in safety. Everything's fine. They get to the other side. Periodically, the people face problems. Moses, we've run out of water. What are we going to drink? Moses says, I'm not sure. I don't know this territory. Turns to God. God says, Moses, people are asking for drink. Here's what you do. They say the water in front of them is bitter. Throw a tree into it. It'll become sweet. Doesn't. People complain about food. Moses goes to God. God says to Moses, Moses, people are right. They've run out of provisions. I'm going to provide bread from heaven in the form of manna, and I'm going to provide meat for them. They asked about meat. I'm going to give them quail. They'll have their supply of meat. They're going to have more than enough meat. And the people eat. And then after he brings them to Mount Sinai, God says to Moses, I'm going to speak with you. I'm going to talk with you. I'm going to talk to you from the top of the mountain. Moses, you are going to go up the mountain to meet with me in the cloud. And the people, they are to remain around the mountain, and none of them is to come up when I speak with you. Moses goes back, tells the people say, fine, we'll do what you say. Third day, Moses goes up into the clouds, and all the nation, the entire people, hear God speaking. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other God besides me. The people are so ecstatic, so enthused, so amazed at what they're witnessing that they immediately say to, when God asks, will you accept my covenant? The people immediately say, or when Moses says, will you accept God and his covenant? The people say, everything that God tells us, says to us, we'll do it and we'll learn it. Moses, we buy into it. We're there. Moses goes away. Remember Cantor, after he receives the revelation, he goes up on the mountain for 50 days. And when a parent goes away, or a leader who's like a parent goes away, and the people don't see the leader around, they immediately become afraid. And that's exactly what the Jewish people do. The leader goes up the mountain to speak with God. People have food to eat. The people are secure. The people aren't facing their enemy, but they go crazy. Why? Because they say to Aaron, Moses, our leader, who brought us to this mountain, who delivered us from Egypt, who taught us about, told us we were going to return to our promised land, Moses is gone. We don't know what to do. Who's going to replace Moses? Who's going to take over Dad's place? And the people are so anxious, you remember, Cantor, that they proceed to say to Aaron, we can't do without a leader. We need a representative, a leader in front of us so we can see. Let's do what we did in Egypt. Let's make a representation of an intermediary figure for God, this golden calf, and we'll worship that, and that will tell us. So Aaron, in a desperate attempt to try and delay the people from rebelling, accedes to their request. He requests gold. They provide the gold. He builds this golden calf, this Egel HaZahav. And Moses, in the meantime, who's on the top of the mountain trying to get the message from God, God says to him, what is this that your people have done? See how unfaithful they are. 50 days ago, when I appeared to them, they promised to follow my rule. And one of my first two rules, the two rules that they heard from me, I'm the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods. Moses, what are your people doing? They are violating the very first two rules they heard, not from you, but they heard it from me. Forget you, Moses. I told them what to do, and the people are rebelling against me. And God says, let me deal with them. I'll wipe them out, and I'll make you a leader I'll make you the father of a new people. Moses says, no. I'm the leader. God, I'm responsible. Don't do it. Moses gives God a lot of reasons why he shouldn't wipe out the people. He goes back down the mountain, and then he proceeds to slam the people. He says, what have you done? He takes the 10 commandments, which God has given him, in his hands, and he throws it at the base of the mountain and breaks the commandments, as if to say to the people symbolically, not 50 days ago, you committed to observe God, to follow God and be his people and enter into a covenant, and now you're rejecting him? God is angry, and he has a right to be angry. You are not faithful. And the people immediately become frightened, and they are fearful. And Moses, after he does what he has to do to punish the guilty, says to God, God, look, people made a mistake. For a variety of reasons, they did not live up to your covenant, okay? Don't wipe them out. Give them a second chance. And God wants that. And God says to Moses, fine, Moses, I will give them another chance. I will not wipe them out. And what's more, Moses says, God, not only must you not wipe them out and replace them with me and my children, You must also agree to go with the people as you promised. You must follow them. You go with them, I'm sorry, through the desert and bring them as you promised to the Father. You don't send an angel, don't send a messenger. You, God, if you don't go with them, they will think you are rejecting them. They will think you are angry with them. And therefore, I'm asking you, please, not only let them live, but go with them and bring them into the land and explain to me why these kinds of things happen. And God, amazingly, this is Moses, all right, Moses, I'll concede this to you. I will not wipe them out. I will go with them into the land. I will not remove my presence from them. I will continue along with them. I will even give you a formula, Moses, in the future when my people anger me, when they turn against me, when they fail to fulfill my commandments and I feel incensed toward them, say these words, Adonai, Adonai, and I will learn to be patient with them. So God does everything. And then after that, Moses begins to sit cantor and he teaches the people Torah. What does he do? God says, Moses, now just stay in the wilderness. Stay here for a year. Teach them Torah. They worry that I'm not in their presence. They worry that I'm not amongst you. Tell them to bring their offerings and build a tabernacle to me. And symbolically, my presence will dwell among you. They will always see me. So for 1 year and a month, the people are trained cantor. What they are done is it's like taking children and training them, taking them to Hebrew school, okay? God is instructing them as to what they are to do. And remember, each day, feeding them manna, protecting with the cloud, providing water for all their needs. They're stationary, but God says, I'm going to take care of everything. I'm going to watch over them. They will lack for nothing. Moses, take this opportunity to teach your people Torah. Moses spends 1 year just teaching Torah. That's all he does. And by the way, during that 1 year, just so for everybody's benefit, there are no incidents that are reported. In the book of Leviticus, from the middle of Exodus to the end of Leviticus, there are no problems of any grumbling or corruption or evil which befalls the Jewish people. It is kind of like the honeymoon period between God and the people of Israel. During that 13 months, the Jewish people sit and study Torah and everything else is provided for them. Finally, when God has determined that the time has come, he says to Moses, enough. You and the people have been here long enough. They have seen me, they have been with me, they've spent a year studying with you, learning my law. Your people are now ready to proceed. They will now see that I will do what I promised them. I will bring them into the land of their ancestors. Moses simply says to the people, God says you're ready. God says the time has come. You are now ready to enter into the land. And remember, when you go, you are not going alone. The same God who has done everything from the time he sent me to Egypt to deliver the message to Pharaoh, the same God who redeemed you and cared for you is going to be with you, and he will guarantee your success. People initially are saying, okay, beginning of the book of Numbers. We're ready to go. We're ready to do it. Moses organizes the camp. God tells him exactly how this to be organized, what to do. Everything is all set up. And now finally they are on the march. 1 year, 1 month, 2 months actually, the second month, they are now marching toward the land of Israel. It is now for the first time that we hear about grumbling. But here is the problem. The people are grumbling about the same issues that they were disturbed by the first time. We don't have water. We don't have food. We don't have variety. The same kinds of issues. Now, the question is, you're right, God has not provided, but God has provided both Moses and the people with something. The knowledge that they are not alone, the knowledge that God is with them, he is in their midst, and he is not leaving them alone. You could say that at this point, Moses at least, maybe not the people, they're still the people, but Moses at least would have confidence that God's message was good, that God's teaching was good, and that he would be able to deal with the problems that arose. But no sooner do the people start complaining about food again than Moses' attitude has completely changed. He has broken down. Rather than patiently turning to God and saying, God, now that we're moving again and we're leaving Sinai, we don't have any food, Moses despairs. He says, the people want food from me. They want variety. They want quail. They want meat. There are 2.5 million people here. How on earth am I supposed to provide them with meat? It seems as if the people aren't the ones here who are at fault. It seems that Moses doubts God's ability. God, how are you possibly going to feed this people? How can I solve this problem? It's almost presumptuous. Moses assumes that God appointed him to solve the people's problems. And that's the problem, by the way, everybody, with the image of parent as leader. When we say a parent is a leader, what do you want a parent to do? Whenever there's trouble and a kid doesn't have a solution to the problem or doesn't know how to deal with an issue that confronts them, what do? They go to mom or dad and they say, Mom and Dad, help. Okay. Now, if mom and dad are normal parents and the problem is a problem they're associated with, familiar with, they can help. Or if they're good parents, they can say, what would you do, Tatala? What would you do? How would you solve the problem? In other words, instead of jumping in and solving the problem for them, maybe what the parents would say is, let's look back at what's happened in the past. When you face these problems before and you face those fears, was there an answer to your problem? What was the answer? How did you? They might try and ask them to learn from previous experience. Moses doesn't do that. He completely becomes unhinged. In other words, he says, suddenly throws up his hands and says, I don't know what to do, God. As if he hadn't had the experience of the previous year behind him. So in a way, yes, it's the people's fault. In a way, it's a lack of faith on the people's part. But at the same time, Moses is suffering a crisis too. And let me go on here. Let me raise the next question. Where in the Torah, up until now, and you've all read the portion, where in the Torah did God ever say that Moses was conceived or was the parent of this people and it was his job to nurse them? Could someone tell me where in the Torah God says that? Anybody want to try? Go ahead, Gail.
According to Rabbi Sachs, God never said that.
God never says that. God never told Moses what his leadership was to consist of. He never said to Moses, Moses, these are your people. They are your responsibility. You are to care for them. You are to supply their every needs. And furthermore, Moses, you're going to have to do this alone. You're going to have to do this on your own. God never says this to Moses. He never dictates the style of leadership Moses is to apply, nor does he suggest that Moses is either the parent or the nursemaid of the people of Israel. If, Gail, that is true, if Gail's statement is true, then where does Moses get this idea? Can someone tell me, if God never told Moses to do it this way, where on earth does Moses think this is his responsibility? Go ahead, Michael.
Well, the people keep coming to him. Moses, you got to fix this for us. Moses, we got this problem. Moses, we have that problem.
All right. So in a sense, Moses, who is their leader, the people come to him. He sees their leader. And so Moses says, it is my responsibility. That's what he says. Why does Moses say that, Michael? Why does Moses feel that it is his responsibility?
Well, I just natural tendency, I think. If somebody did that to you, you know, or if enough people did that to you, you'd start thinking so too. You know, maybe it is my job. You know, they're expecting it of me, so it must be.
All right. When my kids were very little, Michael, and they faced a problem, you know, a simple problem, a problem that they had never confronted before, and they came to me or to Randy and they said, Mom, Dad, we're having this problem. What do we do? The first time around, or the initial time they faced a problem, we would help them come up with an answer. We might work with them in coming up with their own answer, or we might solve the problem for them. But as our children get older, Michael, and they go to school and they face problems, do we as parents jump in with the solution every time our child comes to us with a problem?
You're asking the wrong person a parenting question.
All right. The answer is we might be inclined to, but we have a name for those kind of parents who, whenever their children have a problem, they solve the problem for them. Sometimes the parents don't even wait to be asked. I have dealt with a special kind of parent, okay, who whenever they say junior or what's the female equivalent of junior, whenever they see their son or daughter possibly confronting a problem, they will immediately jump in and try and solve the problem in advance, even before sometimes their child asks, by intervening with the teacher or whoever is they see as being responsible. The name we give to those kind of parents is what? What kind of, what?
Helicopter parents.
Helicopter parents. Right, okay. Helicopter is a nice way of putting it. Why helicopter? Because they're always hovering around their kid, always there watching what their kid is going through. If God forbid the kid faces any kind of a crisis at all, they're ready to swoop down and intercede and do what they have to do in order to solve the problem and make sure little Bobby or Bobby, what's another name?
Sam,
Or no, a girl's name.
Sam, Samantha.
Or Samantha is always is taken care of. But the truth is, we don't help our children when we intercede before they ask, and sometimes even when they ask us how to solve a problem that they're capable of solving, we can help them understand the problem and understand possible solutions. Lori, go ahead.
So when the Jewish people were cognitively ready, when they were no longer children and supposedly adult thinkers, they should have been given the tools and the choices to figure it out for themselves. And that's what we do for our children. We help them become adults by giving them the resources and the tools for them to figure things out.
When your son, Lori, came with a problem, how did you, when Alex came to you with a problem and a confrontation, an issue he was having, and he was a little older, how did you attempt to help him to deal with the problem? What did you do?
Well, we had to talk it out and decide, well, what was the problem? What are your choices or solutions for those, for taking care of that? What do you think was your best choice? And based on what you've done in the past, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what do you think would work for this problem? So we talked through it.
Okay. What was the advantage, Lori, when you presented the problem objectively and helped your son see the issues and resolve the issues he was confronting? What was it you enabled him to do that he couldn't have done, say, if you hadn't been there? What did you give him the ability to do?
Think for himself.
Very good. You gave him the ability to think for himself and to solve his problems with your help, but on his own. Parents, I'm going to tell you something very important. If you are going to be successful parents, you better train children who are capable of solving their problems on your own. You will not follow them through life. You will not. I mean, most of you will, statistically, will not go through life with your child. But the point is, you're not going to constantly be with them wherever they are. You're going to have to equip them with the self-assurance and the confidence and the trust in themselves to be able to handle whatever will come, even when you are no longer there to help them. So what I think Lori is saying is, the way you deal with the problem when it comes to your own child is, you sit down, you help them to understand the nature of the problem, and then you give them hopefully the tools as they are growing up to confront the problem on their own, to deal with the issue themselves. And it is through dealing with the issue themselves that they gain the self-confidence, the self-reliance, the assurity that they will be able to go on. Isn't that right? All right, go ahead, Jerry.
Rabbi, I feel like Moses still appreciates spiritual things. When he saw the burning bush, I mean, how many of us would go towards it, get close enough and hear a voice, and then a voice tells us, take our sandals off, you're on holy ground. Moses took them off. So now here we are. He still appreciates spiritual things. The Israelites are failing too, in general. I mean, Joshua and others, okay, but it's weighing on him greatly, and he's taking it now personally. And it makes me think, like, when I was a child, my dad was repairing his car. He had a bolt to cut in half, and he's using a hacksaw, holding the bolt with a vise. And he's working on it, the sweat's coming up his brow, and he says to me, now when this falls to the ground, if you pick it up, you're gonna get burned. Well, what did I do? I picked it up and I got burned.
Got burnt.
I told you that was gonna happen.
You learned, Jerry, by making the choice that you made and by suffering the consequence that you did. And you probably never went to do something like that again because experience is a great teacher. Now, let me return to Cantor's question. When God first confronts Moses and says to Moses, I'm sending you, Moses is not a complacent follower. Moses, unlike the Jewish people, doesn't say, God, whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do. Just give me my instructions. Moses says, God, don't send me. Moses is the reluctant child. I won't say he's the wicked child or the rebellious child, but Moses is a reluctant child. He says, God, you're a very capable God, I'm sure. Send someone better than me. You don't want me. I know me. I know I'm not your man. I know I'm not the person to lead your people. So God, all due respects to you, you appeared to me, but find someone else. I'm not up to the job. Moses doesn't doubt God. He doubts himself. And he says, I'm inadequate. I'm not the one. I'm not articulate. I'm not persuasive. I'm not the man for you. Get a better man. God says to Moses, Moses, you're perfect. Your inadequacy is what makes you ideal for the task, because no one is going to ever suggest that you yourself managed to redeem the Jewish people. You were a damaged instrument. When you attain your goal, people are going to realize it was not your mellifluence or your oratories. It was not you that brought the people out. They're going to recognize it was God. The only problem you have, Moses, says God, is that when you see injustice, you become indignant. When you see slaves being beaten by taskmasters, you get angry and respond. When you see shepherds coming to drive away women from the well first, you get angry and respond. Moses, your great gift is you have an intolerance for injustice, which makes you the perfect vehicle to go in and represent this persecuted people. You can't stand by and watch injustice occur. That's why, even though you're not articulate, you're not this, you're not that, you're my messenger. Go now and go in, okay? Moses does exactly what he is told to by God. He now comes out, and it's quite clear that he has misinterpreted somehow the message, okay? Moses has misconceived his role as leader. Moses knows himself. What he doesn't understand is what a leader is supposed to be. You see, Moses buys into the image of great man as leader, parent as leader. Let me explain this to you, and then you can respond. Moses thought of leadership in terms of the role of a parent or a charismatic leader. Such a leader is strong. Such a leader is persuasive. Such a leader is articulate. And most important, such a leader is effective. This was Moses' image of a leader. A leader's got to be articulate, strong, effective. He's got to be a know-it-all. He's got to solve all the people's problems. Whatever comes up, he's got to be able to deal with. The problem was that Moses had a wrong idea of leadership. Moses thought he had to do it all. Moses thought he had to be infallible. Moses thought that whenever there was a problem, he had to be the one to come up with the solution. And guess what? Moses was wrong. That's not what God said to him. God never said, you are a parent, you have to bear this people because of yours. He said to him, Moses, this is my mission, you're my messenger. Now, Moses, however, was not that kind of a leader. Moses was not that kind of a man. But to be truthful, when God first wanted to appoint Moses as a leader, Moses said to him, I'm not your man. I'm not this guy. If you're looking for someone who's charismatic and articulate and has all these abilities, God, don't look at me, look somewhere else. But God said to Moses, it's not the instrument, it's the message and that I send with you. That is what is to be determinative. Okay. The problem with a parent leader is the following. And I'm going to say that I'm going to read this so you can understand it, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay. The trouble with Moses's understanding of leadership is that he sees leadership as being, quote, parent leadership or great man leadership. Okay. The problem with such leadership is it never allows space for the leader's followers to grow. Hear what I'm saying? If the leadership model is parent or great man, then the people who are led never have a place, never have space to grow to be responsible individuals. Because every time there is a problem, every time there is an issue, every time they confront a situation they can't deal with, what are they going to do? Because of a lack of self-confidence, because they haven't experienced before, because of a lack of ability, they are going to turn back to their father or parent source. They're going to turn back to them and complain, what do we do now? How do we deal with this? Help us, answer our question for us. The problem with answering those questions for them, whether it's Moses or even God, is the following. If you are that kind of a leader, the people that you lead will forever remain children. Okay, let me say it again. If that is your style of leadership, the people you lead will never grow up. They will always be children. Okay, why? Because individuals, to become independent and responsible, must face problems on their own, must come up with solutions on their own, must go through difficulties on their own, must struggle within themselves as they confront each of these situations, and ultimately they must find their own answers. If they do not do this, they will never grow up to be an adult people. Moses didn't understand this. Moses thought he had to treat the people as children and had to solve their every problem. And Moses said, I have no ability. I have no secret pill. I have no answers. They come to me as if I have the answers. I don't have the answers. God should have said to them, Moses, it's not your job to provide them with the answers. It's your job to teach them how to learn responsibility and how to face these challenges and how to grow in spite of them. I'm sorry, Lori, go ahead.
While that approach was appropriate in the very beginning, when they were fleeing, it's no longer appropriate now. And he had to learn that it was time to move on. And he didn't see it that way.
Very good, Lori. You've answered the question ultimately of why Moses has to be replaced in the end. Moses will never be successful in losing his wrong image of leadership. Moses was fine for a nation of slaves that had just escaped out of Egypt and were afraid and needed guidance every step of the way. But as this people grew, as they learned, and especially 40 years later, when their children who grew up in the desert free were ready to go in, the kind of leadership that Moses conceived of, the leadership of the parent, was no longer appropriate for them. It wasn't that Moses necessarily sinned, it was that Moses was no longer the right leader, okay? When a young people, as Lori says, rebel and complain, what do? You hit them with a stick, or you hit a rock with, you use force, you compel them. When your child runs out into the street, you don't sit and argue with them or rationalize. You give them a shot in the tush and you say, don't ever do that again, right? Try doing that with a 25-year-old. Try when your 25-year-old jumps out and give him a shot in the tush. That's not the way to solve the problem with a 25-year-old. Why? Because the way in which you deal with a mature, responsible human being is not the way you deal with a child. And if as a leader, you don't understand that with changing times and changing circumstances, the nature of your responsibility as a leader also changes, then you are no longer fit to be leader of the people.
Robert House, I have a question. Not a
Sure,
question,
go ahead.
but a comment. God also comforts Moses by giving an advice to the leader to tell them to recruit 70 other men that they could help him out with the burden, because Moses, like you mentioned, he thought that it would be just him and himself in charge of all these different activities and different chores that it needed to be done to keep this group going. But Moses started learning little by little that he needed to start doing something about it.
All right. Sonia is suggesting another answer, and I want to seriously look at the answer that Sonia suggests. Maybe Moses was frustrated that the responsibility was all falling on him, that he felt he had to do it alone. He was the leader, he had to deal with all of the problems. And Sonia is suggesting that maybe the answer to the problem, and we'll look at this next week, Sonia, is that God says to Moses, Moses, you don't have to do this yourself. You don't have to come up with the answer to these problems and face the grumbling of the people alone. You should appoint people to help you. If that's the case, Sonia, and that would be a good lesson to learn, that would mean that the problem that Moses is facing here is having to do it all himself, and that is why he is faltering. But I will show you next week that the 70 elders who were called upon by God to join Moses never really assisted him in leading the Jewish people, okay? If you are right, that the problem was because Moses felt so overwhelmed with all of the responsibility to take care of the Jewish people, then you could say, all right, so God says to Moses, you don't have to do it alone, appoint 70 men and they're going to share responsibility with you. Maybe that would have been enough, Sonia, that Moses would have said, you know what, God, thank you, I can use the help, and that's the problem. But we're going to see that even with these 70 people, Sonia, Moses doesn't become any more patient. And when the people challenge him, he doesn't become any better at this, okay? We're going to see that the problem wasn't that Moses was alone. He never really was. We're going to see that the problem had the wrong idea of what leadership was in general. If Moses's only problem, as Sonia suggests, was that he was being asked to take on too much and he had no support, we can understand his getting tense and impatient and anxious and even angry and saying to God, why am I dealing with all this? But we're going to discover that even when Moses is told, appoint other people to join you in spreading the word, even then Moses is not going to be satisfied, Sonia. So it's not just simply a matter of finding other people. Go ahead, Cantor.
So can I make a case for Moses?
Sure, absolutely. Go right ahead.
So you and Rabbi Sachs make the case that God never tells Moses you're in charge, that God never tells Moses you're going to be the leader, you've got to deal with all of this stuff. That's kind of a, you know, he may not have said it in so many words, except by his actions, he you know, I don't know that anybody would have come up with a different thank you, a takeaway. I mean, God puts Moses in charge. Yes. Moses doesn't want to do it. God says, don't worry, I'll tell you what to say. Well, I don't speak. Don't worry, I'll tell your brother what to tell you to say. So he puts him in that position. I've got a little problem with the text. Okay. But it's not in here, it's back in Exodus.
Okay. Remember what God says, Cantor. God doesn't promise Moses there won't be any problems. God never says, Moses, this is going to be a cakewalk. All God says to Moses is, Moses, you are the leader. And I agree with you. Moses is the leader. Moses, you are in charge. You are to go. You are to be my representative. You are to take this people and bring them to the Holy Land. Clear.
His agent.
His agent. But God doesn't tell Moses the style of leadership to adopt. He doesn't tell him what leadership pattern to follow.
Right. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. Okay. I want to go back to the Red Sea.
Go ahead.
Okay. So either I'm missing something, which is possible, but I'm in Exodus where we're now at the Red Sea. Okay.
Okay.
And the Jewish people say, I'm going to skip ahead. Let us be and we'll serve the Egyptians, for it's better for us to serve the Egyptians than die in the wilderness, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Moses, what does Moses say? Moses says, have no fear. Stand by and witness the deliverance which the Lord will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom we see today, you'll never see again. The Lord will battle for you. You hold your peace.
Correct.
Okay. The next verse, which I don't understand at all, says, then the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry out to me? Mm-hmm. But Moses has just done exactly what the Lord wanted him to do. to tell the people to believe in God, that God would take care of it.
Mhm.
And now God says to Moses, Moses didn't cry? I don't see where Moses cried out to
Okay.
God. I don't
All right.
see where Moses went to God and said, what do I do?
Okay.
I see Moses doing exactly what God wanted him to do. If now you carry this whole story through, but now God says, well, wait a minute. Why are you crying? Oh, okay. You cry. Now here, tell him to go in the water and you raise your staff.
Mhm.
So they think you did it. Not me, God. They are going to see you raise your staff, Moses. They're going to see the sea split. They think you did it. That God is setting him up for the Jewish people to think that he's channeling God. Okay.
I
So
follow you. Mhm.
now they start complaining again, and Moses, now things start going downhill again. Where has God given Moses the tools to, leaders aren't born. They say leaders are born, it's BS. There's so many different factors that go into how we're created as how our leadership skills or whatever are learned by example, by tractate, by studying, by whatever. So by God not teaching Moses how to lead, Moses can't teach the people how to lead. So I don't blame, I'm sorry, I don't blame Moses.
Okay. I follow you, Cantor, part of the way in your description and your analysis, only part of the way. Yes, God has said to Moses, you are going to deliver my message. You don't have to come up with the message. I will deliver the message. You go to the people, you speak the words I tell you to speak, and I will do the rest. Now, God, in saying that, Cantor, has given Moses the only instruction he needs to know. And God says something more. He says, you'll be successful. When the people come to Moses and they say to Moses, we're going to die here. You brought us out to die. The Egyptians are coming. We can't go any farther. Without even questioning God or asking God for anything, Moses' immediate response is, no, you're not. You're not going to have to do anything. God is going to take care of it. How does Moses know that? Moses knows that because he has spoken with God, and God has previously assured him that the Jewish people are coming out. The only thing that Moses knows is somehow or other God is not going to disappear, is not going to abandon this people. God is going to be there. So when the people say, Moses, what do we do? It's better for us to go to Egypt. We should go back to Egypt. We could be slaves, but at least we'll be able to live. Moses says, look, don't you worry about anything. The Egyptians that you see today, God's going to take care of them. You don't have to do anything. At this point, don't worry about what you do. Just know for an assurance, God is going to handle this all. Once Moses has done that, once Moses has essentially said to the people, your problem is not to worry about how. Your problem is just to believe that God will redeem you. And remember, Cantor, this was the first real test after the plagues. Then you are correct. Moses turns back to God. Okay. Now we don't hear the question, but no doubt when Moses turns back to God, judging by the response, Moses's probably question to God is, we have to assume this, what do we do? It's not articulated, Cantor. It doesn't say Moses said to God, what do we do? But when Moses stops and turns to God, the assumption is that Moses is as perplexed as the people are. They're facing the sea, the Egyptians are coming. We have to assume that Moses said, and it's not recorded, God, what do we do? It is in response to that unasked question that God says, what do you mean, what do you do? I told you what to do. Cross the Red Sea. Don't bother me with this. The people's task isn't to fight the Egyptians. The people's task is not to worry about their survival. The people's task is to trust in me and go forward. And Camp, you probably remember the Midrash that then the Israelites start forward. And it's only when the first man gets into the water up to his neck to demonstrate his faith that God then delivers it. In other words, God says, at this point, I'll take care of the Egyptians. I'll deliver my people, but they've got to show some trust in me. I did everything up until now. I sent the plagues. I took them out of Egypt. I want a sign. Just like in Egypt, they took and they put blood on their doorposts, which was dangerous. I want them to go forward. I want them to move. I want them to believe in me. So Moses is forced to say to the people, or I assume doesn't tell us, Moses says to the people, God says, go forward. It is only then, Cantor, and Cantor is right, that God proposes a solution. God doesn't suggest this in the beginning, but once the people demonstrate that they are ready to trust in God, then God says to Moses, lift up the staff, not your staff, Moses. You're not going to assume it's your power. You're not channeling anything. Lift up my staff, the staff that you work miracles with in front of Pharaoh. Take that staff, hold it up in front of them, and let them see not that you're doing it, but that I'm doing it. And later on, Kathy, you remember when they fight the Amalekites, Moses himself is the one who proposes a solution. He says, Joshua, take some men, go and fight the Amalekites. And God never tells, I'm going to stand at the top of the mountain and I'm going to lift up the rod of God in my hands to show that the same God who brought them through the waters of the Red Sea is going to be there with them to defeat the Amalek. So the point is that Moses is not usurping. That's where I would question. He's not usurping or channeling or taking away from God's authority. He is using the symbol of God's authority to try and tell the people in these early tests, when you fear, when you worry, when you question, do not turn back because God is with you. I think it is a demonstration. Now that's all right, fine in the beginning. It's all right at the first test and the second test and the third test to do it. It's okay to take the staff when they complain about water and take that staff with a sign of God's power and hit the rock and water flows. That's all fine. That establishes that God is with them. It takes them a few tests, or maybe a lot of tests, to realize that God is still with them. But at a certain point, they can't be questioning every single time that there's a problem. Whoa, we were better off in Egypt. Let's go back. We enjoyed our life better there. That is not going to produce an independent, free, responsible people. Now, I'm only going to suggest this to you because we're getting a little late. Okay, as the alternative to the nursing parents' role of leadership, there is another kind of leadership. What alternative does Moses have? By the way, there are a lot of kings of Israel who also took what we call the strongman approach. Remember when we studied the book of Samuel, why was Saul chosen? Because he was a big man and he looked impressive. And the people looked at him, he was a head taller than any of the other men. And the people said, now this is a king. This is a man who's going to go out and fight our battles for us and lead us out into battle and bring us back. But remember, Saul proved to be unworthy. Saul was weak. And later on, when Samuel was told, those of you who haven't studied this don't know this, told to appoint another king instead of Saul, he is told to go to the family of Jesse. And Jesse has a lot of sons. And Samuel's looking, he says, well, that oldest one, he looks good. He looks strong. He looks like he's impressive. God says, no, not him. Oh, the second one looks good. No, not him. And he goes, and finally, it's the youngest, it's David. And God tells Samuel, God does not see things the way humans see things. You're looking for something. You're going by the eye. You're looking for someone who fits the king motif, the strong man, the leader. I, God, look for something else. I, God, am going to judge a leader by something else. And contrary to Samuel's predictions, he ends up anointing David, a young, seemingly innocent and unprepared and unworthy shepherd, to become the king of Israel. So I would say this, if it's not the great man theory of leadership or the nursing parents, the absent parent, what other leadership form do you know? Hopefully, I've never made any of you feel like I was your parent and you came to me to solve your problems. If you came to me to solve your problems as your rabbi, then I failed you. First of all, because I probably didn't solve your problems. And secondly, because I probably didn't even told you I don't have the answers to those problems. So give me an alternative model. And this is how we'll end tonight. Give me an alternative model to the leader as a nursing parent. Anybody want to give me the alternative? Go ahead, Gail.
Well, you yourself said it. Not a parent, but a leader doesn't want followers. He wants to create other leaders.
Right.
People who will learn to solve their own problems.
How does the leader do that, Gail?
Not by delegating necessarily, but by the same examples that other people have given. When my son came to me to solve a problem, I said, I'll help, I'll support you, I'll go with you, but you need to learn how to solve this problem.
Okay, in what way were you leading him? How were you leading him? Lori, go ahead. How was that leading? Well, go ahead. What's the alternative model?
By being a good role model.
More than a good role model. A good role model is the start of it, but what else? Look at the end of today's the topic. A nursing father or a
Leader,
patient teacher.
yes.
Patient teacher. The word rabbi means teacher. I have never taught anybody because I was charismatic. I have never taught anybody because I was articulate or because I was a perfect role model or because I had an answer to every problem. If I was successful in my years working with the Jewish community, I was a teacher who taught people how to be self-reliant, how to recognize that leadership is cultivated from within one through experiencing challenges themselves and confronting those challenges. Here now is an alternative model. Moses doesn't realize that he was picked by God to be a teacher. As a matter of fact, what do we call Moses in Jewish tradition? Moshe what? Rabbeinu. What does it mean? Moses, our teacher. Okay. You want to know an alternative model to the great man theory of leadership, Saul or someone like that? You want an alternative to the theory of the parent who always steps in and solves things? No, a person who teaches another person how to be a leader himself. That is the answer. If a leader can train not good followers, but if a leader can train good leaders, as Rabbi Sachs says, that is the mark of leadership. That is what we attempt to do. Head Gail.
Rabbi House.
Oh, go ahead, son. Yeah.
As an educator myself,
Mhm.
I truly believe, as a result of my training to become a school teacher, the education starts at home. As a parents, the kids absorb what we do as a models, and that's why they take this to school.
Our first teachers, Sonia, are our parents. That is true. But as will not surprise you, not every parent is equipped to be a proper teacher. Okay. As a matter of fact, oftentimes I have discovered when I have a problem with a kid in school and I attempt to work with the child to solve it, you know who I have to deal with besides the child? You know who comes after me next after the child? The parent.
That's right.
In an attempt to protect. So what I'm not disagreeing with you. It does begin at home because a child's parents are his first teachers. As a matter of fact, the word parents
That's right.
is similar in context and meaning to morim, which is teachers. Yes. But ultimately, if parents are not equipped to be their child's first teacher, and hopefully many of you are, then there will be people along the way who will come along who will take on that responsibility. If not the parent, then someone else in loco parente, which means in place of the parents, who will come up and who will assume the responsibility for raising the child, okay? As a matter of fact, the respect, Sonia, that a child is supposed to give to his father and his mother is in rabbinic tradition exceeded only by one greater sign of respect. Higher than the respect a child owes to his father and his mother is the respect a child owes to his teachers. Why? His parents give him life. His teacher teaches him how to live life, okay? A parent gives us life, but a teacher teaches us how to live our life, okay? So I want you all to keep this in mind as we go to next week's portion about the 70 elders. I'm telling you, the elders are not there to help Moses lead. Read the portion carefully and I will show you these 70 elders do not in fact become leaders along with Moses. It is not like the judges. They don't share leadership with Moses. It's not like God is saying, all right, Moses, you don't have to do it. I'm going to create 70 other leaders with you and you're going to share leadership. No, Moses is the leader. If any of the elders dares to assume leadership, Moses has got to stop them. There can't be many leaders. There can only be one leader. The purpose of the elders is not to make Moses's job easier. It is to provide him with something else. Now, your task is the following. If leaders are not appointed, or if the elders are not appointed to share leadership with Moses, what on earth were they supposed to do? How does God answer Moses' request? God, I can't handle this people alone. I can't do it myself. It sounds like Moses is saying, all right, appoint 70 elders and they'll lead with you. God does say appoint 70 elders, but not so that they lead with Moses. Their job is not to share the burden of leadership by dividing the responsibility. That remains Moses's alone. So you've got to answer the following question. Why on earth did God have Moses appoint 70 elders? What was their function if it wasn't to actually share leadership? And in discovering that, you will discover the end of our great tale of leadership. You will discover the end of what a leader really needs to lead, okay? Moses is overwhelmed, but it's not more people to help him lead it's going to answer. It is Moses is changing his understanding of what a leader is that will help him in the end. And that's what we're going to learn next week. Okay, with that, it is about quarter after. Any questions, any comments? Okay, I will, go ahead, yes. Toby? Is that Toby or no, that's,
I have to unmute him.
oh, you're muted, there you go, okay.
Okay. go
I
ahead.
think page 137 is a good way to look at what's going on
137.
and everything.
Okay, read
And
one.
if you look at it, 1, 2, 3, it's the third paragraph from the bottom of page 137. And that,
Very good. You found the passage and it's in the in next week's reading. I'll read the passage that is indicated. Okay. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs down. God let Moses see the influence he had on others. For a brief moment, God took the spirit that was on Moses and put it on the elders, okay? So that Moses could see the difference he made to one group, the 70 elders. He needed nothing more.
right,
Didn't need the elders, he just needed to know he was effective. The
yeah,
elders were there to convey to, you were absolutely correct. They were there to convey to Moses the knowledge that he was effective. Moses was feeling ineffective. He was feeling a failure. He saw these people, they weren't changing. They were going back. They were repeating patterns. Moses said, why do I keep doing this? I'm knocking my head against the wall. Nothing is happening. God had to find a way to let Moses know that he was having an impact. So with that tidbit that we just got from that page, 137, try and figure out how the elders helped convince Moses that he was an effective leader and that the message was getting across. That's perfect for next week. All right. With that, everybody, you can visit with each other. You can take yourself off mic. All right. Or I mean,
Good night. Thank you.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you for the house. Good night.